Yeah. Yeah. Pro Fan Sports Podcast. Let's get it. Pro fans, tune into the program. Every single week, get the dope, fam. Sean on the mic, very flat too. Keep you updated, that's what we do. Pro fans, tune into the program. Pro fans, tune into the program. Pro fans, tune into the program. Every single week, get the dope, fam.
Yo, what it do, everybody? It's your boy John Altidor with Pro Fan Sports Podcast, back at you with a special segment with my boys Vlad, Barry, and our special guest, NBC Sports Boston's Max Lederman, who's an Emmy Award-winning television media producer, and he's on Twitter, @Max_Lederman. How you doing, Max, and everybody else?
Great, guys. Thanks for that intro, throwing the Emmy in there. So I had to switch my back. Normally I'd have it on display, but you know.
Nice. Got the hardware.
I mean, okay, I had to do my homework. I had to do my homework a little bit, you know. And I think I found that on LinkedIn. I'm like, oh, that's pretty big, man. He's coming on Pro Fan Sports.
Well, thank you very much. It was actually, we won for our documentary on the 08 championship team, so.
Ooh,
cool, man.
Right.
That's awesome. Congrats on that.
Celtics, but you know,
yeah,
a bit of a different.
It's like the like Vlad likes to say, the one in the last 30 years that we got.
That's why Danny is gone.
That's right. No, but congrats on that. I didn't even know that you'd won an Emmy for that, so that's really cool and really awesome for sure. So no, good for you, but Max, that's what's up, man.
Thank you. It was actually, you know, the players that won the championship, and then, you know, a ton of people worked on it. I played a small role, but thank you. I appreciate it.
You were part of the team. You contributed. Right. You were on that squad. So, you know, it was a team effort for sure. As they say, teamwork makes the dream work. So
That's right. That was the Ubuntu year, I believe. That was like their slogan.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, man, with KG and everything. But let's get right into it, man. So last week we saw, you know, the Nets take out the Celtics in the first round of the playoffs here in the Eastern Conference. And, you know, a lot of things transpired right after that. So we saw Danny Ainge step down as president, and then consequently we saw Brad Stevens moving up and out of the coaching position. How's things been? Like, I know it's been a crazy week so far with the Celtics.
Yeah, no, it was, honestly, those are the days that I love, those breaking news days. I'll never forget when they hired Brad. It was 15 minutes before our 6 o'clock show, and Kyle Draper, who at the time sat, you know, like probably like 15 feet away from me. He would later move to like right in front of me, but he was far away on the other side of the newsroom, and it was just like, oh my God, the Celtics hired Brad Stevens, and it just came out of nowhere. And this kind of, like, there were rumblings about Danny Ainge potentially wanting to retire, step down. I heard nothing about Brad replacing him. I mean, to me, that was the real plot twist. Plot twist. And I love that kind of drama. I love the narratives flipping, because it was going to be like a really, like, sour offseason, I thought, just like, man, like, just so much negativity surrounding the team. Not a ton that is probably going to happen. I mean, there should be, you know, a good amount of moves, but maybe not any like really big, huge moves. But now, I mean, that completely got flipped on its head. And, you know, the Celtics went from, you know, a top 10 coach and a top 10 GM or president of basketball ops to a real question mark at both positions. So, you know, the ownership would not have signed off on it if it was if they didn't believe in it. And, you know, part of me feels a little bit like, you know, I'm an Eagles fan, you know, not by choice. I was born in Philly, but so don't hold it against me. But Andy Reid, one of his last desperate moves when he was in Philly was to fire Sean McDermott, the Bills head coach, who had 1 year as defensive coordinator in Philly, because Jim Johnson, their defensive coordinator, died of cancer like in August leading into the season. So this, you know, young kid takes over. They have a down year on defense. So he fires Sean McDermott and then hires his offensive line coach as the defensive coordinator. And we were all like,
Crazy.
what?
Wow, that's random.
crazy.
That's really weird.
It was just and then we started talking ourselves into, maybe not a lot of scheming against the defense, so maybe, and it was a disaster. But this isn't like that because I trust the front or the bosses at the Celtics with Grossbeck. I don't think they would have made this incredibly risky maneuver if they didn't have 100% confidence in Brad in that role, and there's a good infrastructure there. But geez, that's a risk in a really important offseason for this team.
Right. Go ahead, Vlad.
How can they have confidence in him? He has coaching experience, and that's great. But I feel as though front office experience is different, and just knowing what moves to make and knowing what players to get. And I just feel as though he has no experience doing that. And he's still a very young coach. He hasn't won anything. And when you're a coach, I feel as though you want to win so much, you know what I mean? And usually I feel as though you do that transition maybe after you've won so much and you've got, 20 years of experience in the NBA. I don't know how can anybody have any confidence in Brad doing that job? Listen, I think Brad is a great coach, and I like him as a coach, but I have no confidence whatsoever with him as a GM.
I mean,
Go ahead.
No, I mean, to piggyback off that, he's coming out of Butler where, he didn't get like the cream of the crop, the students that are coming out of high school when it comes to players and stuff like that, when it comes to rankings. And, he's been a coach, and I don't think he's been like the best recruiter so far, in his tenure here in Boston. So, I'm definitely with Vlad. Like, what do you think he's going to do, to help himself out here? Because he's taking on such a big position right now.
Well, what I think the advantage is unique, and especially unique to this summer, is that he knows better than anyone what they need, and maybe who they need to move on from, and what type of player they were missing this specific season and last year as well. Like he has a very unique perspective on that. The issue is that he doesn't have that experience dealing with other GMs. Like if I were another GM, I'd be calling for like a lot, and like teams used to there's blood in the water, and they would circle around Sacramento and just try to abuse Vladdy when he took over. He made some terrible decisions, but I think the difference is that Brad, while he's got the final say and he's the guy in charge, I think that Mike Zarin and Austin Ainge are still going to play huge roles. Mike Zarin is the guy that I think should get a lot of credit for some of the smaller little nerdy transactions, or creating not the TPE that they got for Hayward, but traded player exceptions that they got in the past that ended up really paying dividends, like getting one for Paul Pierce in the 2013 Nets trade. This just a little, let's split up these transactions so that we can create separate TPEs, and then they used one of those to get to absorb a contract from Cleveland as they were trying to get under the cap to sign LeBron again. And they took Tyler Zeller and Marcus Thornton, and they got a first-round pick in order to absorb the contract, and they used one of the traded player exceptions. And then that pick and Marcus Thornton ended up turning into Isaiah Thomas. So it's like little things like that. I think Zarin deserves a lot of credit for just smart ways of going about it. So I do think that they'll be okay for some of that kind of stuff. And he's like a savant with the CBA, so he could recall stuff. So, and Brad's super smart too. He's got like a photographic memory. And we'll see about the transactions, but I didn't think they needed to make any changes with Danny or Brad. I thought, basing that on this season would have been like a knee-jerk reaction. But clearly both guys wanted a change, it seems. And I'm interested to see this team with a new coach, especially if it's someone like a Chauncey Billups. Ooh, I think he would be perfect.
Oh, I love Chauncey. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it would be great to see these players who, I think they all respected Brad. And Brad, exceeded expectations a lot. This year was a down year, but he had a track record of that. But I would love to see what the reaction would be to a guy that played in the league, that won at the highest level, that is just like a great human being. So, we'll see. We'll see where they go with that. But who are some guys that you guys want?
Well, Chauncey Billups is at the top of my list as well, for sure.
Funny thing is, Chauncey Billups is coming from the Portland Trailblazers, right? And like there's
No, he's
rumors
on the Clippers staff with
is he on
Tyronn
the
Lue.
Clippers staff?
Yeah, he's an
I thought he was on
assistant
the
coach,
Portland Trailblazers.
with the Clippers. Yeah, he's with Tyronn Lue and the Clippers now.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, I'm looking at Jason Kidd has been coming up a lot, but I'm not really sure about Jason Kidd.
No.
I really love Chauncey Billups, maybe a Sam Cassell.
Yeah, that's the other name.
I've heard a lot about
too.
Mark Jackson, but then the black ball situation or whatever's going on with that, is different. And Atkinson, I like Atkinson.
I like Juwan Howard at Michigan.
I was just gonna say him. That's the other person I was gonna mention.
Yeah, he's a unique guy who has had like a lot of success early in his very young coaching career, and played forever in the NBA. So I do think that's important to get a former player there. But yeah, I who knows what's going to happen? Like, no one saw Brad Stevens coming. He had just turned down UCLA. He didn't leave Butler for UCLA, and I remember being like, he's never leaving Butler. And then not that long later, it's like, oh, he's the new head coach of the Celtics. So we'll see.
With that said, I think Boston is is a city that where you are so used to winning. If you're not winning every year, then you should be out. But in reality, Brad Stevens is one of the top coaches in the NBA, right? X's and O's, and it's the first time he's been out in the first round. In the last I don't know how long, but he's had some success. What do you think it's gonna take another coach to bring this team over the hunch?
Well, I do think that they need somebody that I think can connect with the players and pull more out. And part of it, I think, is just maturation too. With if your best, like objectively best player, like head and shoulders, is Jason Tatum, who's just a quiet guy in general, doesn't have that like fiery intensity of a KG or like a Jimmy
Kobe.
Butler, right? Like or Kobe, exactly. But like that's just not his nature. And he's also young, and isn't as consistent as he will be. I mean, he was still, awesome almost every night. It's crazy to think that how good he's going to be. I mean, he's just so good for his age. I think that we lose perspective on that because he's had so much success so young that we forget that he is, just turned 23. And, Michael Jordan didn't win a championship until he was 27. It's really rare for guys to have as much success as Tatum has had at such a young age. And I think he'll grow into it, but I don't think he necessarily needs to be like the rah-rah leader. But I do want to see if they can get a coach that can kind of, coax more. Because I do feel like this year especially, and look, there's a lot of reasons. Maybe it was COVID, injuries, but where it did seem like their inability to make a shot or not get a call impacted them on defense, which in years past it didn't. Because Tatum is a special two-way player. Like, he's not just the reason that he is like a future MVP candidate is because of both sides of the ball. So
Right.
I would like to see someone who can kind of connect with him better and just sort of advise him, like, you don't need to complain after everyone. It doesn't. It's just clearly not helping. So
Right.
it could actually hurt you with the refs to complain after every trip, every drive. You don't get even if you got hacked, So because the key for him, he adds 2 to 3 more free throw attempts per game next season, and he's going to be averaging 30 points a game.
Like 30 points.
Oh yeah,
That's
absolutely.
He averaged 26 this year.
Yeah. So he's a great free throw shooter, and all of his great scoring games have come with like 15 free throw attempts. So like
Right.
when he gets to the line, he wins games for the Celtics.
Yeah. I've heard names like Kara Lawson and Becky Hammond from San Antonio Spurs. Do you think they're coaches that could pull that out of Jason Tatum?
I don't know Becky Hammond really. She's spoken high of by everyone that's worked with her. I'm pretty sure she's coached a couple games for Pop.
She has.
Yeah, that's right. She has.
But Kara, they all love. they all love Kara. The players do, and the organization really likes her. I just wonder if it's a fair situation to put her in, where she just got a head coaching job at Duke, and barely coached at all this year, and then to all of a sudden take that leap, even though if it were to happen, it would be with the Celtics because she's already got a relationship with all their players. And I have no doubt that she'll be successful. But I just wonder if that's the right time to do it for her. And who knows? Like even with someone like Chauncey, who's never had head coaching experience, that's a leap right there. It could go wrong. Look, Jason Kidd was a bad coach for the Nets, and also not great with the Bucks. So you just never know with a player. And Steve Nash seems to be doing a good job with the Nets. I don't know how much of that is him and how much of that is just having three incredible talents on the team, but it's just a risk. So
he doesn't have to coach.
I could see the Celtics doing someone that's been there before,
For sure. I mean, with the way the team is constructed, we know there's a lot of talks about Kemba Walker, probably being looked at as somebody we could possibly trade. I know that Marcus Smart has another year on his contract that, might be pretty movable for them, for the Celtics. What kind of moves would you like to see in the offseason to possibly upgrade this roster? Because I know there's a lot of free agents that's coming out or restricted free agents.
Yeah, I think if they could move Kemba for maybe not a equal talent, because I think because he missed games, he missed back-to-backs, and he got hurt in the playoffs, and when he came back in January, he wasn't great. Like, we lose sight of the fact that he was basically the same player he was last year when he was playing. He was really good, but almost 20 points a game, 5 assists or 4.5, whatever it was, shooting the same percentages, which he's always been, low 40s field goal percentage, high 30s for three. So that's just kind of who he is. And he looked to have his burst back. It looked like the not playing back-to-backs was working out. And then he had another injury on that same knee, but it wasn't like a wear and tear related injury. But I did see some people, some doctors tweeting that the tendonitis in the knee makes those injuries more likely. So, yeah, he's hurt, and that's something he's going to be dealing with. So, but it's less about that. To me, it's more about fit with the Jays. I think that they might benefit from somebody who's just a 3-and-D and just a pass-first type, distributor, can run the offense. Honestly, kind of like Marcus. I think I've always preferred Marcus as a six-man because I think that's where for some reason, the mentality. This year wasn't as bad, but I feel like his mentality when he's a six-man is just better. Sometimes when he starts, I feel like he tries to do too much. But like I said, it wasn't as bad this year as it has been in years past. But if they could move Kemba for someone, and I don't know who that really is, I like a Lonzo Ball type who's like a star role player, really. Not a star player. Like, I don't think he'll ever make the All-Star team, but just a guy who moves the ball and gets everyone passing and can defend and hit an open three, even if it looks disgusting when he shoots. But he's a restricted free agent. So I don't know if there's a real mechanism to get him because they can't sign him to an offer sheet when they don't have cap space. And you can't trade for him while he's restricted unless they reach some sort of agreement with the Pelicans where they just give him or with Lonzo where he agrees to just accept the qualifying offer. And then I think they can move him, but I'm not exactly sure how that will be possible. And I don't know if the Celtics are even interested. But someone like that, as far as moving Marcus, I'm not against it like I have been in the past. I just think it needs to be for an upgrade, and he's really good. He's good, better than people think because he shoots. He doesn't shoot a great percentage, but he's the best passer on the team. I don't know if he'll be first team or second team all defense this year because he missed so many games, but 2 straight years first team all defense. He's awesome at defense. He's a difference maker on defense. He really sets the tone. He does the little things. And he's tough. He's one of the few guys that are super tough on the team. And I think that we would all agree that they were a little soft this year. So if you're going to trade him, you better be sure he's back, right? That's to me where I don't think they need to trade him, but I'm not against them including him in a deal because, like you said, movable contract, last year of his deal. super valuable around the league. I could see some teams that are maybe some young teams that are ready to take the next step and go from playoff team to contender could use him. But again, if you take him away from the Celtics, they're going to be worse depending on what they get back. So, but I think with the real thing they need is I think like another stretch big, and they need somebody better at center. Tristan Thompson was fine, but like he can't start, I don't think. And Time Lord is just
got to
going
bring
to
him off the bench.
I just think they need a starting center who maybe doesn't have to be a stretch five, but just someone who can shoot and is dependable. Because it really, I was really encouraged with Robert Williams this year. He was awesome, and I thought we were kind of past his injury-prone days, and then he got the toe thing, and it was just, man, after the knee thing, and it really kind of soured me again because he's so talented, and I believe in him as a kid, he really seems to be. He's gotten so much better since they drafted him. Like literally everything. Like even just the way he speaks to the media, the way he understands defenses. Because I always thought like what he needed was time on the court, and that's what his injuries in his first 2 years prevented. But and he got it this year, and it just showed you what a difference maker he can be. He's an elite passer too. The ball flies around. But again, if you can't, it doesn't seem smart to go into a season with him penciled in as your starting center unless you have a really good backup.
I mean, we saw a lot of people wanting Miles Turner, for Hayward. Do you think this is the off season we try and go out for a play like that?
Yeah, he's hurt a lot too. I mean, he gets hurt a lot as well. He's a good player. He's a stretch big, who blocks shots. He's a rim protector, but he's not like he's a bad rebounder. That always weirds me out with guys his size. And I don't think his contract is as bad as it was, especially now that another year's off of it. But there were reports that it was just like that's an immovable contract, and that's why the Celtics didn't want to take him back. And maybe they just thought like, well, we have Robert Williams. He can't shoot threes, but he can, block shots and rebound and defend. So, but yeah, no, if they want, it depends on the cost really. But it does make me wonder how every single summer he is, reportedly on the trading block. He never gets, so maybe part of that is because Sabonis is there and they don't really fit together, and Sabonis is better, but I don't know. I would have no problem with it. They need depth at big, and I would prefer it to be a stretch. So, and he can definitely shoot. So, I wouldn't be against it.
Do you think that Kemba Walker's contract is immovable? Because I think that's something. I think if the Celtics are going to get significantly better this offseason and for next year, they definitely need to find a way to clear a good amount of cap space and get that, contract off the books, so that they can make the necessary upgrades, they need to, to make the team better and to have better guys around, Tatum and Brown, for next year to, get back into the top four of the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's immovable. I know a lot of people do. To me, it's like Al Horford got traded last summer or last offseason. And that was
right.
I argued for his contract. He's 4 years older than Kemba. He wasn't as hurt, but his decline was clear. Philly had no leverage because everyone knew that they had to move him because he was just such an awful signing, an awful fit with that team.
Mm-hmm.
And all Daryl Morey did was put a first-round pick with him, a future a high second-round pick that last summer, and then a future first – that's protected like top 5. So it's like if for some reason the Sixers crater, they're not going to lose the top, couple picks. But and then they got Danny Green back, who's a starter for them. They traded a guy who was not, who shouldn't have been starting, and then eventually wasn't starting, for a guy who starts for them, who fits better, and they're in the playoffs and they're the best record in the East. I think that maybe that's an extreme example. Maybe there's not. Maybe OKC, if they're not willing to absorb Kemba's contract, and then maybe that's the only team. But I just think that if you attach a pick to him, you can move him. And you can, this is one of the reasons why moving on or Danny retiring maybe will benefit the Celtics, is because I think they need to be willing to lose that trade. Like technically in a vacuum, trading Kemba, you're gonna send out more value than you get. But maybe that value in the context of your team is actually more valuable than Kemba Walker. If you can get a player that fits better, or two players that maybe aren't as good as Kemba but are better than Grant Williams and Carson Edwards, and you can just kind of raise the level of talent on your team, maybe that's more beneficial than and you just sacrifice your pick, because the fact that Brad's in charge now makes me pretty certain that they're not going to take a player this year in the draft, because it's like he seems like he's had enough of those young guys. Just boy, so many young players.
Too many of them. Right.
They're ready. The guys that have shown, I think Neesmith, Pritchard, and Romeo are, and I guess to an extent Grant Williams are, guys that I would say, if we can't move them, that's fine. I like Neesmith, Romeo, and Pritchard for sure. And there's an argument for Grant if he can get more consistent with his 3-point shot. But other than that, just get them all out of here. It's time for some new blood. And they tried it last season. It was a weird offseason, shortened. They were in the bubble. The season started earlier than they thought. They were all hurt. Like the Jeff Teague signing was a mistake, but at the time I loved it.
Oh, awful.
Tristan Thompson signing didn't really work out, but at the time I loved it. I thought it was exactly what they needed. They needed a guy that had won, a veteran who had been there before and can add some toughness. It didn't end up working out. He's only making $9 million. Maybe he's someone that they can move. But again, if they move him, they got to bring in some more toughness and another big. So they might just end up having to keep him.
Not to go back to the season, but I remember earlier you mentioned that you didn't think Danny or Brad needed to be moved. So what do you think happened this season? What do you think? Where does the blame for the season lie if you don't think neither of those guys needed to be moved?
Well, I think there was a lot of factors, and for sure the team. Look, Danny didn't do a great job assembling the roster, but I also don't think he had. And part of the reason too is that I think he lost a little bit of touch with the players the last couple of years. He should have seen Hayward coming. He should, but they were clearly expecting Gordon Hayward back, and Gordon had a weird opportunity to get paid in a weird a thin free agent market. He had an opt-out. I just assumed, he'll opt out and he'll just sign a longer-term deal. But it was more – to him it was about money, but it was also about, role. He didn't want to be the fourth option anymore. And I guess, you can understand that. But I don't think that Danny saw that coming, because they basically got – they got Fournier for it eventually. But it was just a big TPE that they got. And so – that really, when you lose a guy that was a former All-Star who was your fourth best player, you can't, or your fourth option on offense, you can't replace that level of talent for your fourth slot easily. That's really difficult. They were in a really unique situation. So Danny definitely needs to take some blame for not seeing that coming, because it clearly, blindsided him. But that said, it's not like he had a ton of options. And I like the moves, but they were wrong. So I do think the talent was not good enough. So that's why I wasn't super critical of Brad, because they just didn't have enough talent on the team. Then you add the health factor. Kemba missed the first month of the season because they thought January was when, mid-January when the season was supposed to start. Then they were like, no, we're going to do it in December. So they were kind of back, they're kind of screwed there too. Then they got hit with COVID. And again, they had the most COVID cases in COVID games days lost at by far in the NBA.
Yeah,
I'm critical of the team for that. I don't think that that's just a random thing. I think other teams did a better job of preventing their players from getting COVID, and I don't know what the Celtics did differently, but clearly there was an issue. But that said, it was it's out of Brad's control in terms of what players are available. And Jason Tatum, was maybe he's still taking an inhaler. I think COVID affects people differently, and we just can't undersell the impact that had. So there was health, there was COVID, there was not enough talent, and also your two best players are young. So it was just one of those seasons where it was a bad year. Brad didn't do his best coaching job, but again, when you take your team to 3 Eastern Conference Finals in 4 years with basically 3 different teams completely, you're good. You do a good job, and you don't get fired after one down season where you had all those things I just explained happen to you. But I am kind of excited to see what a new coach can do.
But we also cannot disregard the lack of effort. I think I agree with you on all those different things that affected the team. But I think from night in and night out, there was just a lack of effort and lack of passion from the guys, and that was just. And maybe there were turmoil around the facility, and that's why both of those guys are moving on to different roles. But the lack of effort was just disgusting. I mean, the Celtics was not a much fun, watchable team this year. It just wasn't.
It was lack of fight too, is what I thought. Because what they in previous years, almost every year that Brad's been here, is an ability to come back after getting punched. They would always get up and they'd have some years they would have 10 games where they won despite being down 15 points
15,
at one point.
17 points. It just didn't have to stay
And
so
this
much.
year it felt like if they didn't win the first quarter, it was like you can just put it in the loss column. And so, but
exactly.
It wasn't that different than last year. And last year they didn't have that problem. And you can't tell me that Gordon Hayward was the rallying cry. I mean, he's the least passionate player I've ever seen. So there was just a weird mix, and it sounds like excuse making, but I do think it was just it was like the last Kyrie year. There was, the example I always use is 99% of the mass in our solar system is the star, the sun, and the planets orbit around it, and one little thing, one planet got a little too big and just threw the orbits of everyone off. And that was Terry Rozier, Jalen, and Tatum after their run in the playoffs. And then Hayward comes back, and just that was just a weird mix of players, even though it was almost exactly the same team as the year before that went to the Eastern Conference Finals. That team got smoked in the second round. And it was a disaster, after that. But I just think it was just a weird mix. And I think that's why Brad has a good idea, or he at least should, of the kind of players that they need to bring in, or at least maybe the players that they need to move on from that can kind of fix that mix.
One last question, actually.
I had a question as well, but you can go ahead, Brian.
Tons of questions.
So you mentioned the name, the guy that was making some of the small deals, that got us Isaiah Thomas and stuff like that. What was his name again?
Zarin.
Mike Zarin.
Zarin.
Why didn't he get the job?
Good question.
I feel as though that I didn't know about him, but I was just thinking, why didn't somebody else that was working with Danny the whole time get the job? That's what I was thinking.
And a lot of people thought that him or Austin would be the one to replace Danny when he retired. And so there's the potential that could ruffle some feathers as well. It's a really good question. Zarin he has interviewed for GM jobs with other teams before. Not recently, but when Sam Hinkie was hired in Philadelphia back in 2013, Zarin had interviewed for that job as well. He's a really outside-the-box thinker. He's a proponent of the draft wheel. I don't know if you've heard of that, where you just cycle through first picks. The impact of your record has no impact at all on what pick you have. It's just a couple year, every year cycle or whatever. I hate that idea, but but that's just the way he thinks. He's really outside the box, really analytical. He's at the Sloan Analytics Conference every year.
Got it.
Super guy. He's a Celtics fan through and through. He still goes to games with his dad wearing his Celtics jacket from the 80s. And so maybe he was okay with it. And, it's an interest, but that's the first thing I thought was man, what's Mike Zarin and what are Austin Ainge thinking about getting just leapfrogged by a guy who has zero experience? But they all work with him, and maybe they were proponents of the idea. Maybe they were no, Brad's got the right mind for this. We'll have other opportunities down the line, but I don't know.
No, that's definitely a good point, and I certainly agree with that. That I thought that was the guy was who was going to replace Danny Ainge, and that they were going to fill in that role because he's been working with Danny, working with the team in the while, and I think definitely the front office has a good amount of confidence in him to be able to not rebuild this team, but reshape, the roster, retool it. And, was definitely a bit surprised that they didn't, hire him and give him the job. But I also think that, Brad's, just too good of a, basketball mind, and, his basketball IQ is too high for the Celtics not to keep him around in some, capacity, in some role with the organization. So they, and also that contract, I think, was a factor as well. With having at least 5 years left on the contract and having to, if they let him go and he signs with another team as a coach or another position, they would still have to pay that contract. And I don't think the Celtics front office was, willing to, to do that and to go that route. Now, my question that I wanted to ask you, Max, was, do you think the Celtics had tuned out Brad Stevens, like the players, and he lost his voice in the locker room? Because I saw that there was some, really disconnect with him and the players, and he would try to, call the players and, his press conferences after the game, and it was like they weren't really listening to him, or it didn't really, matter and mean that much to them. So I just kind of want to know what you think, as far as the relationship between Brad Stevens and the players, and what went wrong with that this season.
It could be. It really could be. I think back to, I think it was like Brad's third year. Evan Turner had a quote where he was just like, they were talking about Brad's like out of timeout plays, and Evan Turner was like, we look at these plays like, this is crazy, it's never going to work, but then it works, and he, we don't question him anymore. And so I think as long as they're having success, there's no issue, there's no disconnect, you don't lose the locker room. But then when you hit, when you don't have success, then it is like, well, we questioned this play and it didn't work, so maybe we don't trust you as much. So maybe, and 8 years is a long time, especially when you have a lot of the same guys there that have success in their own, individual careers. So I'm not going to say that there wasn't. He may have lost the locker room because, like you were saying, with the effort stuff, it just did seem like there were some games where he couldn't say anything to get them going. But I also don't know how many choices he had. What Brad, I thought, was really good at for some of the young guys, especially Jalen, his first couple years, he yanked him. He had no patience for him on defense. If he made a mistake, he pulled him. He pulled him right out of the game. Mm-hmm. He did that with Tice, too, I remember. You could just see it in the first 5 minutes of the first quarter. If he didn't like the way Tice was playing, he just pulled him and you wouldn't see him again. And I think both of those players really benefited from that kind of tough love and just like, look, you need to get these specific things right, and everything else is fine. Like, you can shoot and miss, fine, that's great. Just make the right choices on defense. And so there is definitely a skill there, an ability there, but maybe that just didn't work this year because they just didn't have enough talent. He didn't have enough guy. He couldn't pull a Tatum or a Jalen or somebody that made the poor choice because he just didn't have another option to go to. So maybe that was that he was forced to not coach the way he normally would have because of the talent. But you can't really argue with the results on the court. There's a lot of reasons for it, like I've already gone over, but one of them, I do think his voice lost a little bit of oomph that it had in the years past.
I believe that.
Absolutely.
Right. And I mean, I think that was our last questions right there, man. Thank you so much for coming through, Max. We appreciate you coming on Pro Fan Sports Podcast. Again, if you want to follow Max and everything that he's doing with the Celtics, it's at Max_Lederman. And he's the award-winning television media producer, man. Thank you so much once again.
Thanks, guys, for having me. This was a lot of fun. And keep up. I love this podcast. Good stuff.
Appreciate it, man.
Appreciate that, Max. Thank you so much for coming on and for your time, man. It was a pleasure meeting you and pleasure talking Celtics and basketball with you. So, yeah, look forward to following your tweets and following your work with NBC Sports. So, yeah, keep doing your thing, man.
One last thing. Was moving on tonight, Mavs or Clippers?
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah, good one, Brad. How could we forget to ask him?
Whoever's on the road, right? Isn't that how it goes?
They won all the road games.
Right. So Dallas would be on the road, in that game.
It's really hard because it should be the Clippers, right? But it just, unless Kawhi goes supernova, which he has pretty much every game, it should be the Clippers. I'm going to say Clippers, but it would not shock me if Luka goes supernova as well. That's the point. I think the Clippers have a little bit more of a margin of error than Dallas does. Yeah. If Luka has an off game or if they defend him really well, there's no chance. Yeah. So I'm going to play the odds and go with the Clippers.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good rest of your Sunday, man.
Yeah, enjoy your day, man. Take care. Have a good one.